If you want to make the best out of your time, just add in this 10% more of an element of thinking about it, maybe after class, maybe before you go to bed, whenever, in this specific way with all three of these senses. It's a small investment to be much better than if you didn't do it, because it'd take a bigger investment to make up for the lack of doing a small thing. I mean, they say it takes 10,000 hours to master something. Dave Ruiz says BS. I think our brains are much more sophisticated and much more capable of a lot more if we learn how to use the matrix of the mind in a much more efficient and effective way.
Hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Mayn Idea Podcast, where today I have the pleasure of sitting down with David Ruiz. A quick reminder for those that enjoy this podcast, if you could please take a few seconds to submit a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. This helps the show get discovered organically, and it will allow me to continually bring forward incredible guests. You can also check out my amazing sponsor, Athletic Greens, in the show notes below. David Ruiz is a 5th degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt who has studied Jiu-Jitsu directly under Rorion, Royce, and Helio Gracie before ultimately earning his black belt from Rigan Machado. David founded Colorado Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Academy and was the first to bring authentic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to Colorado in 1997 when he opened his first school. David was 2001 IBJJF Pan American champion and currently teaches at Gracie Humaita in Carlsbad, California. He implements a unique philosophical view while training, while pulling concepts from Neuro-Linguistic Programming to better solidify his teachings amongst his students. His systems of traps, basic kinesthetic principles, present jiu-jitsu in a way that proves the David versus Goliath story. Any practitioner of any size can utilize David's techniques to better protect themselves and advance their position. I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Without further ado, Professor David Ruiz. Well, David, Professor, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be here. I've been very excited to have you on. You and I have, over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, getting to know you and train underneath you and Nick over at Gracie, we've just always had really, to me, meaningful conversations, kind of off the mats or on the mats, talking philosophy, movement, the body, training. So I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it very much. This is very exciting for me. I always love sharing. I always love exchanging. Every time I speak, I'm learning something. So,
well, you have a unique perspective on jiu-jitsu. So if we just very briefly unpack for people that maybe have thought about training or already do, as a 5th degree black belt, the amount of time that you have put into this sport, it's almost immeasurable, because at that level, so much of your life has been given to jiu-jitsu. It's not like you just showed up a bunch of times. Like you have become it. It has become you, and you've given yourself to this sport. And in doing so, you've really been able to see and feel the sport through a very unique set of eyes with your connection to the Gracie family, the Gracie family, not the 15th degree of the Gracie family, but really starting in Torrance and being under the tutelage of Rorion and Royce and Helio. These not only are they legends to jiu-jitsu, but they are jiu-jitsu, right? They are the most integral part of it. Maybe you can speak a little bit to those early days of finding this art form, finding the competitive nature of it, and what really sucked you in to jiu-jitsu that made you then want to, and maybe not made you want to in the moment, but then led to you really contributing your life to this sport.
It's a funny thing, because this is all pre MMA, pre UFC, pre anything. Martial arts was a big. You had karate, you had taekwondo, you got judo. You did have martial art. We have martial arts, but it wasn't until before the UFC when I first discovered it. I just walked into a martial arts store. And I was bored. I was off work one day, and my girlfriend was working, so I walked into a martial arts store. I'm going to go look at the nunchucks, the stars, the bow staffs, whatever. And I was like, videos, cool. And I was like, real action videos, and I was like, real fights, real blood, Gracie Jiu Jitsu in action, the first one. Didn't know what it was, but at the time, bum fights was popular. I'm like, oh, cool, real fights, but these guys are for real. So I watched it, and there was Rorion Gracie speaking so eloquently about it and explaining everything in detail, why everything is going on, what's happening, and how their thinking is. And it was just made such much logical sense. I watched it 100 times, watched it 1,000 times. I didn't give it the video back. I gave it back so late. Then I checked it out and ran it again. I got so obsessed with this. It's all my mind can think of. This is like, well, why didn't anybody think about this before? It's like a baby out of the womb getting spanked. Like, here we are, but we had martial arts here the whole time. But it was just this amazing thing. So it took me, it's just like a wildfire. So I went out and got the second in action. I went out to visit them, bought a T-shirt, wore it like my favorite football team. And, and then I joined. And this is all pre-UFC, and the rest was kind of history. I was right about it. It wasn't a fad. It was something that did work. So very unique in itself, and I just had to join it and learn how to spread this beautiful thing.
So when you began, you're in Torrance at the original, right? Like when they came from Brazil, they opened this location in Torrance, California. So you're really there at the genesis of this thing. What was the atmosphere like in that academy?
It was truly amazing. When I first visited the academy, I was there when it was closed. My mom wanted me some tickets to fly out to Los Angeles at the time, so I called up Rorion from the yellow pages, for the white pages. Called his house. This is pre-cell phones.
Yeah.
So he answers the phone and says, yes, my friend, hello. I'll be right down there. I'll be 5 minutes. 5 minutes he was there, opens the door for me, gives me this grand tour, buy a T-shirt, the next video and all that. It was like, but after joining and being there, finally, I was like any other kid. I got my gold card, $5,000 limit. So what did I do? I went in debt right away. Just threw the whole academy on the thing, just all $5,000, just the whole summer, right? I'm gonna have a great time training with the best. Yeah. Nobody knew him at the time. This is before UFC or when it was blowing up. So I was just this excited kid. These guys were like the greatest. Like Michael Jordan or something,
right.
But to anybody else, they're nobody. But I just thought this was the most genius thing that there is out there. A smaller person really can beat up a bigger person, so to speak. But the atmosphere, it was just amazing. It was alive. There was a buzz. You could feel it. We had challenge matches back then. You could smell the testosterone in the air. You could smell the fear. You could smell the excitement. Everybody was talking about it underground, but it was hush-hush, because it's kind of illegal. But we had cops there, actors there, everything. It was like the mecca, the place to be at the time. At one point, we had newspapers from every single continent, magazines, news. Everybody, it's a different week, a different month. It was something special, something new. A challenge match here. These big people coming over here. The number ones from the Kodokan who came from when Helio fought Kimura. The people from Kimura's camp came to us in the 90s, and it was closed doors, of course. But I don't think we lost.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. If you enjoy this podcast and the guests that I have on, you can support it by checking out my amazing sponsor, Athletic Greens. I started taking Athletic Greens because I've always been a firm believer that health starts on the cellular level. From my competitive years as an athlete to my weekly output of jiu-jitsu, surfing, and strength training, cellular nutrition is a non-negotiable since I need every leg up I can manage. That's why I won't skip on ingredients or quality when I start my day with pure AG1. Plus, AG1 contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, and it honestly tastes good, while all costing less than $3 a day. Look, if you put in the work, you need to reward your body. So, to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/Abe. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/ABE to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And so challenge matches are pretty rad. I mean, when I think of even, growing up and watching like Kung Fu movies or Bruce Lee movies or 36 Chambers and just like this whole idea of martial arts, that is this art form that you can use to protect yourself, but you can also use it to attack people and vice versa. It's a little bit of a dance, a little bit of aggression, and challenge matches were kind of like the real life version of martial arts, right? It's you are part of, right today. First, we reflect on today, right? I can go to Gracie Jiu Jitsu and train. I could also go down to Legion and train, or I could go to 10th Planet and train. That's a new age thing. Like back when you're in Torrance, there's a lot of loyalty to the school that you're at, right? And you're under the tutelage of the people that own it, and you're representative of that school. And so the challenge match comes about by way of the gym down the street goes, we could whoop their ass. And you're not allowed to just say that, because if you say that, now you got to do it. And so you're inviting this, it's an open door to anyone else that wants to challenge you, right? Yeah. And what would you, like, how would you welcome that? So you're training one day and you're in there and people knock on the door. I mean, what was that energy like?
It was, at the Gracie Academy, it was one thing. Rorion led the whole show. He would have me with the video camera follow him, and while he was talking to the person, I guess, what do you call it, selling the fish,
yep,
buttering him up, getting them to get more commitment to fight if it doesn't work out the first time for them, inviting them in a nice way to fight again. Maybe if the circumstances were different, the outcome would be different. Let's try it again. Would you like to fight this guy? He's smaller. Or would you like to fight the same guy? Never but anybody bigger, because we're always trying to sell something here, and that's the effectiveness of Gracie Jiu Jitsu. That was the whole point, and that was a beautiful thing to me, because it wasn't about us. It's not about me. Today in MMA, it's about everybody. It's about the individual. It's about you, me, and people blow up on that. But it wasn't about me. It was about the art of Jiu Jitsu. We fought as a family, like a team, and we believed in something. And it was Helio Gracie, it translated through Rorion, that they really instilled that belief in us. And as far as like being able to go to different schools, things are a little bit different, I would say, with Jiu-Jitsu. Now, I come from old school, and I understand a new school. I'm very open. But this is an art that takes a lot of dedication. Yeah. And for somebody to put a lot of their energy and soul and hard work into that person, it's a dedication. Now, I'm not saying an attachment, because everybody's free. That's not a good thing to be attached. But to have that loyalty, like, hey, this is giving me is everything. As long as they can keep providing, which would be a good teacher. At some point, if you're a blue belt, you can only teach up to that level. Right. But to be a great teacher and to be a solid teacher, you have to provide more than just the techniques, the philosophy, the strategy, everything behind it, the lifestyle, the way of eating, the way of the outlook off the mat. All of these things you're pouring in. So to go hop around at different places, that instructor might not know all the knowledge that's been poured into you as the main instructor did, and I know exactly how that person is. Right. And even if they do, it's going to be two different roads maybe, because they'd have two different ideas for that student maybe, aside from what that student wanted. Right. If it's not a good teacher. So
what was it about those philosophies that spoke to you?
Well, I didn't know I was going to get that. Truly, I went to, at the time, early days. I went to college. I went to school. I went to school for sports medicine, nutrition, philosophy. Even I went to school for philosophy. But you know why I dropped out and quit? Is because of my teacher's lack of passion. That's why I stopped college completely. I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the energy that I didn't feel any. I was giving. I didn't feel anything back. Not that I'm supposed to. I'm expecting anything. But the point is, when I went to the Gracie Academy, and to learn and get educated as well, I got way more than I expected, way more than I thought. They were like wanting to make me better. They wanted to help me. They wanted me to grow. They had a passion in making me better. I'm like, whoa, who am I? What is this? This is wonderful. I'm not treated like this. This is great, There's a passion in teaching. Yeah. I want to call it the passion of Helio that was filtered through Rorion. And that Rorion makes the best teachers in the world, and it was filtered through us, who was ever, the seed didn't drop too far from the tree in the apple or whatever.
It's true. I think about, obviously at this point, the belts mean something in the grand scheme of things, but they don't mean anything. Like to me, it's the day-to-day lessons of being there and getting to learn from people like yourself and Nick and Steve and everyone that we are fortunate enough to train with. It's those parts that are so valuable, and I think that that's what has me I'm going to do this the rest of my life. I already know that. I'm much more beyond the contemplation phase of whether or not.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that a big part of that is that I was very gratefully surprised at the lessons that I got from jiu-jitsu that I hadn't gotten from other things, right? I'd been an athlete growing up and skiing competitively, and there are lessons there. But jiu-jitsu was the first thing that really flipped my understanding of who I was upside down, because it challenged everything that I knew about strength, performance, and defense. Because I always just thought, I'm like, strong people just win. That's just what I thought until I went into this academy in Venice. And to your point earlier about littler people being able to defend themselves or even be offensive, the brown belt at this school that I did my first ever like trial class in was a fraction of my size and nowhere near the strength levels, and absolutely put a clinic on me. Like, not disrespectfully, very respectfully, but it put me on my ass, because in that moment, I was so surprised at everything that had just happened. And I was like, what is this? Like, I got to know more about this. And you see it all the time. It's this, you talked about teaching, and I really get that feeling when we're training, right? Is that you want to make me more well-rounded. Like I feel that, like, you're invested in it. And that's a really unique thing to be able to experience.
Yeah, it was for me too. It's funny, but Rorion as a master teacher, professor, he cultivated, Helio and Rorion cultivated this in us. It was very important that, anybody can teach you something, and just walk away, and I was like, oh, he's got it, okay, good. Or ask a question, answer it, good, okay, who's next, whatever, But I think Rorion in the process, and Rorion and Helio instilled in us how valuable the student is. The student is so valuable. I mean, there's masters and servants. The master is the servant, so to speak. You know what I mean? If the students weren't there, we wouldn't have anybody. But if somebody asks me a question, you see me running over there on the mat when I'm borrowing somebody. I always say please and thank you. This is the Gracie way of doing something, the Helio Gracie way of doing something. We're very polite, It's just like when you walked into an academy and you got totally thrashed. I mean, if you would have been manhandled, okay, the guy's just tough. I'm pissed. I'm not coming back. I got a bad taste in my mouth, and sure, he's just stronger than me. Okay, manhandle me. Great,
right.
But you were sophisticatedly taken apart, and that's beautiful.
Yes.
Yes. And there's no bad taste in your mouth. You're like, holy crap, this guy, I didn't feel any strength, I didn't feel this, I didn't feel that. He kind of legitimately beat me. If you're like an honest person with yourself, you're like, there's two types of people. You're either gonna continue fighting them or join them.
Right.
It's Bugs Bunny philosophy. I call it. If you can't beat them, join them. But that's the smart, flexible person. That was me. I couldn't beat him. I was like an idiot. I used all my strength and wrestling skills, and nothing worked.
When did you start to feel like those tides were shifting for you? Because jiu-jitsu is kind of like, just from my experience of training alongside you, your flexibility, your mobility are major advantages for you, right? You get into and out of positions that maybe some other people can't get into, and you totally capitalize on that. When in your progression through your life of jiu-jitsu, did you start to truly feel where your strengths were and like where your game would start to develop?
It's funny. It's like you can't really see yourself as a kid growing up, so to speak, and that's kind of hard to do. But as a teacher could see you and see all the stages that you go through. And the funny thing is, I think we might have talked about this before, or I've talked about this before, and that is when I watched a video of myself compete back as a blue belt, I'm like, oh God, I haven't seen this since then. I'm gonna laugh at myself. It's gonna be hilarious. I'm gonna see myself making all these mistakes, right? And that's what I was expecting. But then I saw myself, and I was like, I was impressed. I was impressed because my general structure of personality of a game was still there. It's like, oh, I could see that's me, and I could see that now, and I'm like, wow, I was actually onto something. I could see where I was onto it. I see when I was starting to catch onto it, and I can see my game develop. I can also see how much I didn't know and all the things I coulda, shoulda, woulda at this point. But I mean, looking back in retrospect, I mean, you see all those things like, wow, it wasn't so bad as I thought. But it depends where you went to school too. I like to consider myself, I went to the Harvard of Gracie Jiu Jitsu. That was the Gracie Academy. However, anybody wants to think about it, it was perfection of the techniques of the way Helio Gracie wanted to be presented, shown, and everything else around that. So, in the philosophy as well. And now we don't just produce or teach, but what's built into our teaching methodology is the philosophy and strategy. Everybody is doing jiu-jitsu in the world, but not everybody's doing jiu-jitsu like we do it. Because we give the philosophy, which gives the strategy of how to use the jiu-jitsu, which means not everybody's using it the same. We have a specific strategy that's going to have a maybe slightly different outcome or look to it.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely unique. There's undertones of self-defense in almost everything that we do, which I feel like has a ton of application. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like there's like three reasons why you end up staying with jiu-jitsu. One is you love the physical output and the challenge. Two is you really recognize the self-defense element, that if something were to happen and you wanted to protect yourself, there's no system better designed than Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to make that happen. And then the third is somewhat of a blend between the two. Maybe you want to be competitive, or you have hopes of a career within martial arts, and you understand that this is part of the game. It's mixed martial arts, so you need to have all the components, and therefore you need jiu-jitsu or wrestling or a combination of the two. And
great point. That's three carrots in front of your face.
Yeah, the self-defense part, I don't think I connected with very much in the beginning, but
the value later started coming.
Yeah, you start to see it, and I think I noticed it most after being at Gracie Carlsbad, because when I would train separately with Steve on the striking, it feels like they're two separate worlds. Like there's the jiu-jitsu world and there's a striking world. But the reality in the world is it's everything at once if something were to ever happen where you needed to protect yourself. And so Steve would, do a drill or Helio style, right? With the touching or striking. Is if I can touch your face, right, then I could punch your face.
Yep.
Theoretically.
You could have been hit. Yep.
And when you start to think about that when you're rolling, when you're training with your friends, your comrades, teammates, it totally changes the dynamics when you bring in hypothetical striking.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw for the first time, like,
the window's more wide open than you thought.
Yes, exactly. Because you can get kind of tunnel vision on training jiu-jitsu, and you can become effective and you can get your systems down and everything. Those completely change when someone's punching you. Absolutely. And you do everyone at Gracie does, but it's such a good job of bringing these principles into it, and then it makes it feel very real life. And you can see where a smaller person could totally protect themselves against someone who's larger if they stick to these basic principles and control their demeanor.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that was the whole point of Helio Gracie's Jiu-Jitsu, is to bring about that. If you have if you know how to handle the situation, you're going to be a little bit more calm and rational about it.
Yes.
Helio has three ideas, three words that shape our philosophy and that shape our strategy and actually shape how we use our jiu-jitsu techniques. Now, for one, we have to be universal. I mean, it's great to have a sport jiu-jitsu game, but I don't think anybody's ever walked through my door and said, hey, you know something? I really need to learn jiu-jitsu. I was jumped. Somebody pulled me into a back alley and threw me in a tournament. So nobody's ever came to me and said that. So, I mean, they've always come up to me like, hey, something bad happened, whether it's a man or a woman or a child. Something bad happened, or something's going to happen and I need to be prepared because I'm being bullied or something. You know? So there's always this urgency. The beautiful thing is they found jiu-jitsu, because I don't think there's any other martial art on planet Earth. I think as far as we went through the 90s and in the 2000s and all of that, proving this. Jiu-jitsu is the single most effective martial art if you're going to take one. And a lot of people are misconceived by jiu-jitsu because they think it's just a ground martial art. It's a full range. We do punches, we do kicks. However, our whole objective is to clinch, not to impress any judges or knock somebody out. If you do, life is great, wonderful. But we realize that the fight will probably go beyond that, and more than likely, 90% of most fights end up on the ground if it goes past that. So we need to know how to equip ourselves. So we have a full spectrum of jiu-jitsu now. The MMA world came up, and now everybody's doing MMA. Well, you can't just survive on jiu-jitsu, man. You have to learn. Yeah. Now you have to be very good at stand-up Muay Thai kickboxing. You better have your wrestling skill. You better have some basic boxing skill as well. These are the tried and true things that really work, that's going to impress and save your butt in a ring with the specific rules that they have today.
Right.
But in the beginning, there was no time limit. There was no rules. There was no gloves. And that changes the whole paradigm. All of a sudden, those big strikers are going to bust their hands on somebody's head, and now all they have is their elbows and knees and other stuff, and they can't use their hands. It's happened before in Brazil with the fights with no gloves and stuff. So it totally changes things. So is it the ultimate fighter? I don't know.
Right, it's a component for sure.
And take care of, and say no rules, and let's see. But then it's about the system now. It's about the system, because in jiu-jitsu, we wanted to take the masses and learn so everybody can bring up to par and not be bullied anymore. It was for the smaller, weaker person, Right. But now it's turned into this big sport, and you have to have these other elements that go along with it.
Do you feel like jiu-jitsu is maintaining or losing that core philosophical element?
I believe that there's a few of us out there that are perpetuating this and instilling this and growing this, but not everybody's doing it. I think if you're some of us that were touched with the golden hand of Helio Gracie and of Rorion, it was really instilled in us the value of Gracie's Jiu-Jitsu and how it should be shown and presented and the philosophy behind it, because this philosophy shapes our strategy. That shapes the way we use jiu-jitsu. And the philosophy shapes the way we think on and off the mat. You look at Helio Gracie doing something off the mat, everything is efficient. And the three words that make up the philosophy are patience, control, and efficiency. You look at Helio Gracie off the mat doing stuff at home, and he's very patient, he's doing everything very efficient, he's got a smile on his face. Life is meant to be enjoyed, not endured. One of the greatest things that was ever taught to us, Confucius would say the same thing: a man should never open a shop unless he's got a good smile on his face and a good attitude. But Rorion Gracie always said this. Euler is just the example of it. But Rorion and Helio always said, smile. Show them your teeth. Smile. It lets bars down. It puts the ease down. Heck, it took me a lot to get into that gym. What do you think it takes others? A person who's not a fighter, person who is maybe not tough and young and coordinated and strong. So we have to take these things into consideration and treat that person of value and the way of learning. Everybody learns different. That's the point.
That's such an important aspect, and definitely something I think unique to jiu-jitsu in the academies that maintain it. If I just reflect on all the different sports I've been fortunate enough to do, and I'll point to skateboarding and skiing as big ones because they shaped a lot of my childhood. Skateboarding is not very accepting of people that haven't started skateboarding yet. Like if you are at the skate park and someone new comes up, there's a whole economy to understand of like who's don't get in this person's way. And it's very unlikely that someone would show up to a skate park for the first time, or surfing too, exactly, right? You go to a local spot, first time on the beach, board in hand. It's so unlikely that someone's going to paddle up to you and say, hey, are you just starting out? Do you mind if I give you some, here, come with me. I'll show you how to not get in people's way. I'll show you how to paddle, how to stand, right? It's not going to happen. It's quite the opposite. Yeah. And skateboarding is the same way. It's like, you're not okay to be there until you're good enough, but how are you supposed to get good if you can't be there? Yeah. But when you get to the mats, the first thing, well, you'll notice this I can only speak again to Gracie, but like you'll get on the mats, and the very first thing that happens when someone new walks in is that they get introduced and their hand shaken by the most senior people there. So usually black belt will immediately walk up and introduce himself and say, hi, how are you? Welcome to training. And then is followed suit by everybody else. Because to your point, you want this person to feel like it's okay for them to try.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what brought them there. They just get their ass beat by their cousin. Did someone beat them up at school? Did they get cut off in traffic and the person scared the shit out of them and they realized in that moment they don't know how to protect them? Like, you don't know what's building them up to the moment where they go, I need to go find a jiu-jitsu gym. Yeah. And so if they go in there and what they're met with is assholes who are like, get out of here or prove yourself, that's just not a very...
Wrong gym, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a positive environment to bring them up in. And granted, when you begin, then you can see the variance in skill, right? Because you'll feel it. If you're brand new to a place, you're going to train with people that are very skilled, and you will immediately feel the difference between you and them, like instantly. So you at least get that piece at some point. But that first, it sounds like from Helio and Rorion and the Gracie family that was an integral part of their concept, is to bring people in who don't have a place.
Yes, but let me just implement this. The academy we're at right now, all that greatness is usually by the leader. The reason why I'm teaching there, because I come from the Harvard of being taught jiu-jitsu. Helio firsthand showed me how he wanted his art to be done and shown, and all translated through Rorion. And this was many years of hard work, thousands of hours, spending hundreds of hours of private lessons with Helio Gracie, in small group privates with just maybe 2 to 4 guys. And it was really unique and really fun, but it was really instilled in us as well. So there's not too many of us out there, but we're trying to push that. And I think it's very important to keep pushing that card.
Yeah, it's important. It's important. It's interesting the different feelings that you get when you begin to train. I don't know I'm sure you can recall on those first couple of times, but I know in the very beginning, everything felt so fast and chaotic because your fight or flight kicks in.
So you just get to high school. Everything's so overwhelming and cool and so impactful.
When in your evolution did you start to feel like that? The fight or flight that is present at the beginning of your journey, we'll say. When did you start to distance yourself from that or start to feel control over that fight or flight, and where you really sunk into being able to actually see like what's going on in front of you and your opponent?
Well, for me, it was slightly different because I come from a background of wrestling when I was a kid, wrestled for 4 years. Knowing what I do now, I wish I would have pursued the whole dang thing, went all the way to college and stuff, but probably would have beat up, injuries. But so wrestling, so I have competed. I've done Taekwondo when I was a kid. My mom put me in when I was a little kid. I've done different types of martial arts and stuff. I've gotten in fights and altercations growing up, moving from like San Francisco to Santa Cruz to Colorado and all that when I was a kid. And so that really wasn't, the fight or flight was never there for me. For me, honestly, I've always had what they call that switch. You can turn it on, you can turn it off. And a lot of people don't have that, and it needs to be built upon, and that's what we do. If you ever need that, we can turn that switch on, and you can fight in a real situation and have that cool, calm collectedness and be able to see the moment to moment of the fight. But I don't think everybody has that, and so it would come for some people. Me, it was always fight, fight, fight. I just wasn't good in the beginning.
Fair.
I had to develop that part. But as I developed it, the fight or flight in real situations did start to change. The confidence was way different. And it was exuded. The other people can feel that. And sometimes that would just, best part about it is the fight would be over before it started. And that's winning to me. So,
yeah.
I mean, that type of confidence does a lot. I've got a lot of silly stories like that, unnecessary silly stuff about that. But I mean, usually somebody doing something bad or just being a jerk. You know what I mean?
When you were getting in, you said you got in, obviously fights, brawls, stuff like that when you're younger. It sounds like that was before you found jiu-jitsu or throughout that?
These are just kid fights here and there, sprinkled throughout the years as a kid growing up. Especially one who does a lot of rough sports and tough stuff, and goes out there and does fun little stuff. I was never a jerk or got in a bunch of fights. Wasn't one of those kids. But I always fought for a good purpose or actual reason, not for stupid stuff as a kid. But I mean, I'm talking about more of like fights after I knew jiu-jitsu.
Wild.
After I'm well aware, and this is not picking fights, of course. This is just what was instilled in us, like with the stories from Rorion and Helio and Royce was, or Rorion or Hickson or Helio, they would only fight for a just cause. In a real street fight, you're not going to bully anybody around. It's always for a just cause. And even Helio said, if you fight for a just cause, you're going to have all the forces behind you. But if you don't, you're going to be a jerk. Hey, you're on your own, buddy.
Right.
So karma.
Have you ever, outside of this, like we'll call it the confines of a training facility, like once you started really on the jiu-jitsu thing and you were training with them and you were doing challenge matches, did you ever find yourself in an altercation completely outside of a training environment?
Yeah. LA, being young, if you go out, some things can happen. I mean, I've been in not even doing anything wrong, just that, being in the wrong place, wrong time. You're like in the wrong area on accident. All of a sudden you got a gun pointed at you like, hey, where you from, homie?
Damn.
I'm out of here. I'm not here, obviously.
Yeah, it's not. I am not right here, sir.
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten myself out. Me and a couple buddies, jiu-jitsu guys, have gotten ourselves out of a lot of stuff. But I'm still here.
Yeah, the control and confidence within adverse situations is something that definitely speaks to me. Like your innate response in a lot of situations is to put forth more effort, more aggression, more strength. It's just kind of, we seem to be wired that way. And you quickly learn that that's not going to lend itself at all to endurance or decision making.
Yeah.
And it's only when you can calm down, and that may even be applicable, in a street setting, right? Like to have your wits about you in a moment where losing your wits could really cost you or someone that you love something serious. Having those moments of clarity that you get from constantly being in that fire on the nights that you go train, I don't know how to put a value on that. It's definitely changed me I can feel my demeanor just self-regulate a lot better when I'm out just
you learn
myself.
To live comfortably in the jungle.
Yeah.
You learn to live comfortably in the jungle. Before I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what's going to get me. But now I kind of know everything out there that can get me, and I know how to defend it. It's now up to me to be aware of it. So yeah, you learn to be comfortable.
When did you decide, and how did you land on Colorado? I've obviously grew up in Colorado and Steamboat. You brought jiu-jitsu, authentic, true jiu-jitsu, to Colorado, to Denver. What was that departure like from Torrance? Obviously, you had this support and everything from the family, but why Colorado? Why bring jiu-jitsu there at that time?
It was pretty much almost luck. I had family and friends there. I went to high school there a little bit. I'm always born and raised California, then Colorado, then California. So. Yeah. It was easy because during my journeys of jiu-jitsu, I met a girl and we got married, and she was a flight attendant, and we got married the first day we met, and then I was able to fly for free.
The first day you met?
That's not why I did
it. Wait. You literally got married the very first day you met each other?
Yeah, I got a lot of crazy stories, man. I feel like Forrest Gump.
Damn.
Unworthy. But
that's wild.
Weird stuff has kind of happened. I guess you could say I'm spontaneous.
Maybe we're too surface level right now, and we needed let's peel back an onion layer here. I need to hear this story. Jeez, unload.
It was through jiu-jitsu friends met, and we just we just hit it off. I'm like, you want to get married? And she just happened to say yes. It was the first day we met, and I was like, oh, I guess I wasn't expecting her to say yes. Wasn't really, I was the first day,
Right.
And so we go down to South Central, and it was horrible, disgusting. We're like, yeah, this is gross. So we got the marriage thing. We were officially married, but let's not do it here. So 9.5 weeks later, we got married under Cliffs of Palos Verdes with just jiu-jitsu friends there.
Yep.
But where was I going with this? Oh, yeah, she was.
I like where this is going, but you were talking about you were talking about Denver, opening up Denver.
Yeah, she happens to be a flight attendant, right? So because we were married, I didn't know any of this, not why I did it, but I was able to fly to Denver for $5, pretty much free. First class, $10 if it was available. So that was great. So I was flying back and forth. I started teaching my best friends. And then I started teaching their friends. And then all of a sudden, it was the summer of 97, and I was teaching there. And I was like, so I decided to go to somewhere and say, does anybody want me at a school? The response was huge. Everybody wanted me. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? Heck yeah. It's not here. And you're from the academy and all that and challenge matches. So they thought that was great. And so I just started teaching at a place, and I became dedicated to my students. Now, I become dedicated to people. I only had a small handful of people, but they wanted me there so bad they didn't want me to go back to LA and never come back again. So I became dedicated and asked my wife if she wanted to move there, and she said, yes, I can move anywhere. And I said, well, if I can fly back to LA and keep training, life is great. So that's what we did. And I became dedicated to my students. I was the first school here, Pioneer Jiu-Jitsu, Colorado. Pioneer Jiu-Jitsu to Colorado, the very first school. And from there, we held every single title in the state. We had a bunch of schools. Then more schools started popping up. And then a best friend of mine, Mauricio Zingano, came out there before he passed away. And then, of course, he opened up school. And then now it's just saturated to schools everywhere. But I pioneered jiu-jitsu out there, had to educate everybody, pound the pavement hard to tell everybody what that was. And I was one of the only schools, probably the only school that had live challenge matches at it. Because I always held the Gracie Challenge always to prove, not to prove that, obviously, that we're the toughest guys in the world. That's not what it's about. But to prove to the world that we have a system that works time and time again with devastating effectiveness like a scientific project. To get a theory or a theorem, you have to prove it over and over again with consistent result. No martial art has done that, but we have come the closest. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu out of it. That's why we've proven it to the world. So now everybody has to have it into their system.
And so when that got off the ground in Denver, I mean, obviously it's well received. Denver has a pretty good jiu-jitsu footprint at this point, and UFC 1 is held in Denver. So you also have a community of people. Well, it's actually held in like Broomfield, I think. Not Denver. It's like adjacent, but you have a community that's receptive to this, right? For some reason, Coloradoans welcomed mixed martial arts on a massive scale, and the UFC is able to pull off their first grand scale event there, UFC 1, which you were also a part of, right? So when that came about, how long had you had your school in Denver when the chatter about UFC 1 was really starting to go on?
Well, I came way after that. The first UFC was November of '93.
Yeah. You were 97,
and
right?
I got there in '97. So really, it was only 4 years later. I mean, looking at it now, it's like that was such a long time ago. But I was only there 4 years after to open up the very first school teaching Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. So that was a nice little landmark too. It just happened to be Denver, and being so well accepted. And so I had a lot of people in the community that were well aware of it. I did a lot of pounding and pavement to educate people, but there were some there that it was kind of nice because they kind of knew about it.
So why leave this? I know personally that you're still very connected to that school. We've been fortunate enough to train with some of your guys that have come out. And what brought you, why leave Colorado, go back to California when you have this good thing going on there?
Well, for me, it was a couple of bad things happened out of my control and stuff. So for me, it was just like, it's time to go. I put in 20 years of service there. I've had, we had 9 schools up at one point. We still have Sean Stewart running Colorado Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu out there, Satori. He's doing an excellent job. Sean is an awesome person. He was he was a real estate attorney before. He went to Princeton, very well educated, and he just decided to give it all up to run one of our schools because it was something he believed in. It was our philosophy, number one, how we did things professionally. Because there's a lot of meathead schools out there that just open up a school. Some of them hardly clean their mats. I've heard nightmare stories of how people are treated, from children to adults to women. It's kind of appalling sometimes, but the way I was educated, Helio Gracie way, I mean, you won't catch me saying, "Hey, come here, let me borrow you. I'm going to show a move." You'll never hear those words out of my mouth. It's always please and thank you. That's the way I was educated, and that's the way you'll always hear me speak on the mat, even in videos. So you'll always see me standing up in base no matter what. And if I don't, my hands are full. And I'm telling everybody I'm not standing up in base. Or at least that's going into my head. I'm always standing up in base. It's the Helio Gracie willpower. It's that discipline that they instilled. And that's the piece that if maybe my room's not the cleanest in the world or my car, but at least my jiu-jitsu on the mat, that's going to spread off the mat, maybe not to my car or my room, but to my business, to my family, how I handle my situations, how I handle fork in the road. How am I going to look at it? Is it going to be just a little hiccup, or is it going to tear down my whole world? No, it's going to be a little hiccup on the road. We'll get by this. We can get through anything. That's what jiu-jitsu's taught us. We learn to be more resilient, to overcome and adapt and be more flexible. That neuroplasticity of thought. Heck, man, if you have been doing jiu-jitsu this long or for a certain amount of time, you haven't got it yet. Hello, welcome to the party. Come to our school. Let's have an awakening.
Right. When you said fork in the road and kind of the mindset that jiu-jitsu has given you, I guess there's a two-part question. I've been really trying to get better at not asking two questions at once, so I'm going to break this up into two questions, but they do go hand in hand. Okay. What has been the biggest fork in your road?
On the mat? Off the mat?
In life.
Oh, in life, geez. I think some of my most personal friends know what that is, and that's my flesh and blood. My flesh and blood is the biggest fork in my life. Being apart from my daughters and stuff, that's the hugest. So, then the second. But how one deals with something that they have zero control of, or you're just pinned against the wall and you're just like, naked for the world to see, and it's like there's nothing you can do. Hey, I could still live. I can still be fine. I'm still okay. Being able to bounce back and still have a good outlook, to have good people in your life, to still share that and feel that, and to know an outcome later in life is going to be something that you plan for.
And so, has there ever been an event or a thing in your life that you would really categorize as like that one really brutal speed bump? What has there been?
As far as the biggest thing in life, that was pretty much it. This is flesh for me. It's flesh and blood. There's nothing more important.
Family. Yeah. And then the second part to that is, what about jiu-jitsu and the lessons and the philosophy of jiu-jitsu, your lifetime spent in it, helped you navigate that situation?
That's the point. Yeah. Really, it's what it really boiled down to. I trained hard my whole life, teaching my whole life, spreading jiu-jitsu, teaching people how to be more flexible, adaptive, and then voila, you get crushed by a wave yourself, and it's just like, how are you going to respond? If somebody never asks themselves the question, something happens, you don't know how you're going to respond, and some people don't like the response, and they're upset, and they're like pissed that they reacted in such a way. But you can't get so mad unless you pre-planned. When something goes bad, how will I respond? If this person does that, how will I react? Most people are like, well, if you do this, I'm going to get very angry. Well, that's predisposed failure right there. That's your own predisposition for your own failure right there to feel bad. After they're long gone, I'm still punching myself in the crotch. Does that make any sense? No, it really doesn't. So why punish yourself? So I think life should be enjoyed, not endured. So I try to live by that philosophy. Things may be bad, but if I feel bad about it, then that's basically the feelings that I've been pouring in or accept to believe. I think it was Bruce H. Lipton with Epigenics. He said that we've proven through biology and even quantum physics, you create your own world, you manifest everything through the thoughts that you think. Well, yes, we know this is true, but we know this on a chemical level and biological level as well. And he's basically said, all evil enters through, Helio Gracie once said, all evil enters through your mouth. Bad food, eat the Gracie diet.
Right.
I say, Bruce H. Lipton says, and I say, all evil enters through your ears and your mouth. Your mouth from the food that you eat, but your ears what you choose to believe that's actually hurting you. So I think if there's something we can do about it, do it. If there's not, then we better change the way we feel about it, because otherwise we're just going to be punishing ourselves over and over. And if I think anything jiu-jitsu has taught me to be more resilient and adaptable to some of the life's hardest things, there's no two things worse than life than death and betrayal. And when you have to go through those things, we do need jiu-jitsu for our mind. We do need a philosophy. We do need a strategy that's going to be upheld by a philosophy that is our backbone and our sail. That's what it is. It's pounding through something, getting back up, and moving forward. If I can instill any value in children, that's what it is, to be more resilient. Who cares if they said that about you? Laugh it off. That's great. You know, kid told me I had a big head too when I was a little kid. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Learn to love it and take leadership. If I'm going to teach a kid to get rid of a word, my friend just told me, make sure it's the word just. That's beautiful. Take the word just out of your vocabulary, because what do kids do? Well, so what school do you? Oh, I just do this, or I just drive this type of car. I'm just a bus boy, or whatever. Take ownership. Take the just out of it. I am a bus boy. I drive a Pinto. You know, 78 Pinto. It's awesome. I love the thing. Saves me on gas. You know,
right. We
could turn anything around. It's all it takes is a paradoxical shift and a different way of looking at something, and voila, we're magicians. And all of a sudden, our heart feels different, and good feeling is attached to
it. If any of us can glean a fraction of those insights from jiu-jitsu, we're all in really good shape. It is pretty remarkable what this sport, this art form does give you. And to your points, like this flexibility, and I don't mean muscular flexibility or skeletal flexibility, but it's this, you can have a game plan as much as you want when you train. You know, as you always say, slap hands, take a deep breath, calm down, and train. And as soon as you do that, things happen. You know, you grab a lapel, someone grabs your sleeve. You thought they were going to grab your lapel. Okay, well, now I have to deal with that. Break the grip, they grab your collar. Okay, it's like, yes, it's adults wearing bathrobes, playing on the ground, right? But at the same time, it's not. It is a metaphor for life. You're constantly having to adapt to what's being thrown your way. And it's not to say that jiu-jitsu is the only thing that teaches you this, right? Something like chess is a very good example. You move your piece thinking a couple moves ahead and what you're going to do, and someone does something that you missed, and now you have to recalibrate everything that you're doing. And jiu-jitsu forces you to do this in real time while you're fatiguing, while you're losing energy, and in many cases, while you want to be not where you are, right? You're on bottom side control and you're pinned, and Steve's shoulders driving up your chin and into your mouth and into your nose, and all you want to do is escape and then sweep them, and you can't, because the way that you're trying to do it, the thing that you're actively going after, doesn't work.
Yep.
Yeah, it's getting shut down.
Completely shut down here. So now my only options are here. And now he shut them down to here. Now they're only here and here. And now he shut them down here. So now it's only there. But down there, so now I can only go through there.
Yeah, and even
you have all these scales going on. Should I do that or do that? Do I have enough energy to do that? What if I don't get it? Do I have enough energy to do this? And now it's attached to that. And now it's all connected. And you have a million scales going off. Whether you're going to decision-making scales, you know, and it's a million. You make more decisions in one roll than you do all month at work and home put together. It's so amazing. True. And then when stuff slows down, you have to make a decision. You got all this time to think about it.
It's so funny. Like, I remember the very first thing where because obviously at this point, right, like jiu-jitsu has a big impact on my day-to-day life, my personal mental well-being. You know, it's hand in hand with meditation and taking care of myself. And one of the very first places I noticed the concepts of jiu-jitsu play out into just life was surfing, which I had been surfing for a long time. And it makes a lot of sense why a lot of surfers train jiu-jitsu and vice versa, because they're very much about flow and using momentum that's available, not fighting it, and learning how to calm down.
You can't go against Mother Nature. You have to.
You will lose 100% of the time, right? It's like Father Time, undefeated. And I remember when I started surfing, your perception of how big the surf is really skewed. You always think that it's big because you haven't been surfing that long. So you go out and surf in 3-foot waves, and you think it's 5 feet. And then the more you surf, you realize it's not that big, and that then you start to see the difference in wave size. But occasionally you go out and you're like, oh shit, it's it's big today. And you think again that it's bigger than it was because you haven't surfed this big yet. And you survive. And then the next time you're out, you're like, oh, okay, I'm starting to understand the scale. And
a little further and a little further.
Yep. When I started to train jiu-jitsu, I felt like I had been put so far out of my comfort zone in certain settings that then when I went and surfed, I had a new level of chill because I would be paddling out, and in my head, I would just think, I'm like, dude, for 15 minutes straight with 1 minute rest, I can survive someone trying to choke me. So this wave that's coming at me, I'm going to chill out and relax. And it was the first time that I saw this like mental application of this thing that I love doing, transfer.
Took from you transferred it, you took it over here, and now it just has this calming effect on you.
Totally. Yeah. And then from there out, I was like, I think it was there's been many points along this journey where I feel further hooked, like it ropes you in, and then that rope gets fastened down a little bit, and then you get roped in and fastened down. And that was one of those moments. Is from there, it was a new level of calm that is present in dangerous or heightened situations.
Yes.
And I don't know how to get someone to know that without training.
Vice versa. The bravest dudes in the planet Earth, I think, are the big wave surfers. I mean, what the heck on land's going to scare them? Certainly
that's
not
true.
A fight. I mean, that's the opposite.
It's true. Yeah, it is. It is funny. It's funny how that happens. You get like they ask some world champion MMA fighter, like, what's the scariest? And they're like, roller coasters or something. They're like, I can't get on a roller coaster. But you can last 25 minutes in a death match with someone who's trying to throw elbows through your forehead. It's like,
yes, it's funny. One time, my UFC fighter, we were sponsored by Pro Exotics and Reptiles Company, and they took us for the first time to the Reptile Company, and they're taking out these lizards, and me and my UFC fighter were up on our little toes, screaming like little girls, like we're scared.
Yep.
It's silly, funny. Guys can step in the ring, go bang toe to toe with somebody, but they'll be up on the bench on their tippy toes with the little tiny lizard.
I know, it's so funny. I do want to touch on these three components of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. I feel like they very much go hand in hand with this philosophical element that we're talking about of patience, control, and then the third.
They feed into each other. That's the beauty.
And that's there's the 3 points, right? So it's patience, control, and efficiency. I forget efficiency. Mm-hmm. So maybe we can start with patience. What does that mean to you?
Patience. It's very important because in jiu-jitsu you always hear a coach saying, "Oh, relax, relax, relax." And in most schools you go to, you're like, "Oh, that's all I hear is relax. I know I gotta relax more." But really, what it takes is a coach to really explain what that means. You see, when you're relaxed and you have this mindset of flow and relaxation, well, if I go into a match, the opposite, really intense, well, wires together, fires together. I'm causing. If I think of relaxing thoughts before I train, well, those relaxing thoughts have neurochemicals that have a physiological and behavioral response on me. So therefore, if I think calmly, I'm going to train probably a little bit more calm, which means I'll be able to think with a little bit more clarity in the moment to moment of the fight, as opposed to being, oh no, overwhelmed. It's more than a hiccup in the road. It's this and it's overwhelming. Right. It's too much for me to handle. And then now my decision making has changed. Now I'm not patient. I'm rushing for something. I'm going for any opportunity that I can find, and it's not the best one. So without patience and being relaxed, you're not going to find the best opportunity. And that helps out efficiency. You need to be patient to find the most efficient way. Now, you can't be crazy either, and you have no control over it, because then you're going to be rash and not be patient and make a quick decision. It might be not efficient. So you must have control of the situation, so you can be patient to make the right, efficient decision.
That principle, I feel like I'm glad you said that. You go into any place and everyone's always telling you to relax, because it's very true. I mean, the first thing you're probably going to hear when you start training jiu-jitsu, someone's going to tell you that you need to calm down, because you do, but it's the first step, right? The first step is to relax, because when you relax, you give up tension, and when you give up tension, you become more fluid, and when you're more fluid, you can transition and create opportunity and stuff. Well, and when you're starting, your ego gets in the way 24/7, right? Anytime someone does something, you want to beat them, you want to win, and that's just, it's there.
You just don't want to lose. So this is what the white belt thinks. They'll do something, if they don't get it, they'll squeeze and hold on. The reason why they're using a lot of strength is because they're holding on and they don't want to lose until their brain can think of the next thing. And then, and then they'll try it. And if it works or it doesn't work, they'll go back to squeezing until they can think of the next thing. And that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu. I once asked Rorion what's the difference between Japanese jiu-jitsu and Gracie jiu-jitsu? And he says two things, my friend. He goes, one is our teaching methodology, and the other is how we transition from move to move. So that means our transition from move to move are a little bit smoother, which means it's a different mindset. It's kind of like having a neuron and the synaptic transmission between the neuron. The more you use those neurons in action, the more that synaptic transmission gets smoother and quicker, right? Helio Gracie says the secret of jiu-jitsu is repetition. What wires together fires together, and all of a sudden, it's like going through a field of weeds. I go through a field of weeds, I look back, the weeds pop back up, don't know where I was. I walk through again every single day. After a week, there's a little trail now. I see a little path in the weeds. After a couple of months, there's a little dirt trail now. I know exactly where I came from. After a year, it's paved. After a couple of years, I'm just taking a helicopter. I'm just transporting over there. That synaptic transmission is so fast, I don't even need to think. Jean-Jacques says if you have to think about it, it's usually too late. We have to rely on unconscious competence. That means repetition is the key, so therefore we're relying on unconscious competence, freeing up all that conscious space so you can look at all the strategy, the setups, and the things that you didn't notice before, of all the sweeps and arm locks and chokes and opportunities you didn't see before, which now makes your game greater because you're on autopilot, which is unconscious competence. You've got down that stuff. On to the next, and now let's get this down, and then on to the next. Pull out the next plate, next one comes out. Pull out the next one. What's the next thing on the menu? Oh, now this week I like arm locks. This week I love sweeps. This week I love chokes. And now I love this guy's system or that guy's system. It's all to make my personality and make me more consistent in what I love. So I'm happy for the rest of the day.
And it's interesting. You can only see, like when you look at your progress, I mean, I can only reflect on where I'm at in this journey, right? As far as like skill level. But what's interesting is you don't know how much you're improving, really, ever. Yeah. When you're training with either people that are more skilled than you, or training with people that are truly equal in skill and strength to you. Because when you go with someone who's equal in skill and strength, you're both going to win. You're both going to advance. You're both going to have good days and bad days. You're going to exchange energy levels, and that's going to change how you guys train together. But it's hard to see unless that person takes a bunch of time off, and then you just develop more skill,
or they get hurt,
and then on the higher belts, like rolling with you, for example, or Steve or Nick or anyone that's just more skilled, again, it's hard to know, like, where am I improving because I'm learning to keep my hands here? Am I improving because I'm hipping out better? Like, you don't get a lot of insight. And with every advancement you make, you guys are really great, so you adapt to the advancement. And then it's, again, kind of back to square one. But when you do train with people that are maybe equal size, equal strength, but are new, you see how much of a difference it makes when you're consistent.
That is the beauty of jiu-jitsu. I went through that same experience, and it's no different back then as it is today. Those leaps and bounds are huge, and you can actually notice a kind of a wonderful difference sometimes, depending on how big that gap may be, or time period may be. But it's definitely something that's noticeable, and I think that's another piece of the carrot that keeps us going because, hey, I'm seeing the value. Not only seeing the value of it, but I'm actually getting something out of this. You're seeing the results going to the gym. As far
and
as
that part is. I think that part is so. This again is something for me that spills out beyond the mats. And it's to Helio's principle of patience, and something that you mentioned earlier. Let's, instead of jiu-jitsu, think about this as like a business or an idea or an art concept or something that you're trying to grow as a person. You have something you want to bring to the world. You want to open up a school. You want to launch a radio show. You want to do something. There's a couple ways that you'll measure how you're doing it. You'll compare yourself to people that are doing the same thing. So like, oh, I am opening up Colorado Jiu-Jitsu Academy. Here's another school down the street. They have a bunch of students. I'd like to get my school to as many students as them. So there's like these equal comparisons. That's kind of like your belt to someone else of the same belt, same skill, same strength. And then there's like, wow, they have a whole academy. They have 10 locations. They have 15 locations. They're in multiple states. Those are kind of like the higher belts, more experience. And then there's people that want to open a school but haven't. And those are kind of like the white belts. And so it's really only fair for you to compare yourself to everybody, everywhere, because you can't measure your own success based on how I can't measure my skill in jiu-jitsu or my current level of skill based on your skill level. Mm-hmm. It's not fair to me.
Yeah.
And it's not fair to you. But you can assess your skill if you look at everybody's skill set as Dave is somewhere I would one day like to get to in my life. The guy who just walked in the building, I can recognize that my skill might be a little bit further along than him. So it does give you this real world insight into comparison, which I think, they say comparison is the death of joy. That's the thing that can stop you in your track and makes you feel miserable if you compare yourself to the wrong things.
True. Very true.
In life and on the mat.
That's the direction I don't want to go with that, so I'm glad you made that clear. But yeah, it's definitely so. I agree.
How do you, when you're coming out, even now maybe, right? I mean, here you're a 5th degree black belt. Mm-hmm. You are a practitioner of jiu-jitsu and on and off the mats, through and through everything. How does comparison play or not play into your life?
Comparison is a good key for jiu-jitsu, not based on a personality, whether a person needs it or not, but it's a good key to use to keep it real. To keep it real in your perspective of yourself and where you are and what your capabilities are and what you're capable of not doing and doing in a real street-like confrontation is important. We need to understand that. And what better does actual real live training do? I mean, that's what makes jiu-jitsu so great, is because our live training is pretty realistic in a real fight. Granted, if you're not throwing punches, it changes things. If you are, that's still jiu-jitsu. That's how we started jiu-jitsu, with the punches. This thing about not throwing any punches, that came later.
Right. Yeah, like if we talk about the challenge match days, I mean, those...
I honestly, the way I trained was we always, we trained like the way we do today, but for me and the gatekeepers of the Gracie Academy, we always had to be sharp and keep the blade sharp on both sides of the knife, as Rorion would say. And that means we had to be very equipped with the fighting aspect of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and whatever else direction we wanted to. So the choices we make, that I like to make, of stuff that I like to do, whether it's a gi or no gi or whatever, I like to do whatever I do is very universal in nature. That means I can always flip that switch very easy to a real street fight, gi, no gi, whatever it is. I can flip it because most of my techniques still work because they're universal techniques. If I just choose these techniques that only work for this, well, then I'm going to have to completely make a big switch, and that might be too much in a moment-to-moment of real fight. So I like to keep it real. I like to train both, and I like to keep my game pretty much universal. But I do provide any avenue that, obviously, that people want to go down, because we've experienced them. That's the unique part about our school, too.
Yeah, I think you do a good job of that when we're learning, is presenting options of kind of, here's a couple different ways that this could go down, which I think is important, because it makes you zoom out for a second and see that there's different levels to the thing that we're working on. And then you don't feel quite as boxed in, it's another reason why I love at our school we do have stand-up as an offering, right? Like, you can train stand-up separately. You can train in the gi and you can train no gi. Because to me, that feels like the most valuable mix, right? You're getting these three components where now, if you did have to defend yourself, to your joke about getting pulled into the alleyway to a tournament, someone who's going to accost you in the parking lot is not going to come up to you, sit down cross-legged on the ground, and slap your hands and wait for you to engage, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to start on the feet. You're going to need to read body cues. Where are their feet? Are they in a fighting stance? Are they squared up to you? That says a lot about what they know or what they might not know. Are they wearing a jacket? Is the jacket jean jacket? Is it going to rip when you pull it? Is it, like, these are things that you start to think about when you use a lot of the principles that you guys teach us there. And there's tactical differences with when you do and don't have the gi. So learning how the body position applies to what you're doing is important, but then also what kind of material or environment do you have available? Can you use grips or can you not? Do you need to use you'll show us, like, we'll use a hand position instead of a grip if we don't have it. Or you'll talk about, if you do have the options, here's how you can do it. And I feel like that helps deepen the understanding of this art form.
Yep. Given us, studies have shown if you give people more choices, they'll pick the best one.
Right. Right, to a degree, right? You get too many candy bars in the store and you end up just getting a cavity. Yep, but no, it's true. It does. It feels like you're putting more paint on the palette to decide how you want to paint the picture. And I feel like that's super important in these settings.
And choices that are linked together. Choices that are like all very uniquely the same in plausibility, but this is for that, and this is the guy's hitting you. So it's important to kind of point that out. It does take you out of that one-dimensional element and get you to expand in your head, and that's a seed. It goes with the question, like, if you never ask yourself how you're going to respond, you don't know, and it could be the wrong response. But if you do pre-plan and ask yourself ahead of time how you're going to respond, you're more than likely to make a better response than as if you didn't. So therefore, it almost works metaphorically the same.
I want to let you unleash here a little bit and dive into the NLP world, and maybe give a couple of insights into what neuro-linguistic programming is and how. I know that it's been very instrumental in your journey and how you internalize information and bring that to, like, a kinesthetic point. Yes. You'll mention it, occasionally after class or during class, key kind of points here and there, and ones that have stuck out to me, is this idea of, and I've actually practiced this and it definitely works, is the idea of, like, learning in the class with your body what we're working on, but then writing what we're doing down, which is a completely different experience. One, it's also hard to do, to write down everything that you were thinking about. And then the visualization component later, which I try to do at bedtime. I actually put myself to sleep. I'm not kidding. Like, 5 days out of the week, I fall asleep. I'll read first, but I fall asleep, closing my eyes, and I actually try to work basically from, like, a theoretical hand slap through the whole technique of the day, and I can never make it before I fall asleep. It like downloads me. It's crazy.
That's how we fall asleep anyway, if you think about it. We get so deep involved in richly descriptive in each sense that we get carried and drifted away. It's like going into trance. It's like falling asleep. It's like anything else. Going into the zone. Before your match, you can't hear somebody's calling your name. You're just so in the zone. You're focused. You're inside here. Everything is in here anyway. That's what I usually tell everybody. And, I can give a million different descriptions for NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and many people do. And there's many different descriptions of it. It's an attitude. It's a system that leaves a trail of unique techniques behind of doing something the most effective and efficient way. That's what it's all about. But really, when we break something down, we learn. Our brains are not like a computer. They're not digital. We're analog. So therefore, in order to download information into the human brain, we actually have to experience it and go through the movement kinesthetically. So even mathematics, once it's well known, 2 times 2, 4, when you just spit that out, how do you know? How did you know? What told you? Was it an auditory, visual? No. When it boils down to, in a deep level of mathematics, is even kinesthetic, which is a weird kind of thought to think about. But, so since we are analog, Therefore, we only learn through 3 senses. The other 2 we don't really use, olfactory and gustatory. We don't use our smell or taste when we're learning things physical. Anything physical, it's going to be visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. So first, you're going to learn the move. What are you doing? Well, I'm watching the teacher do the move, visual cortex. The teacher's explaining it auditorily, along with the picture. Okay, there's the auditory part. Well, now I have to do the move. So now you get to experience it and do the move kinesthetically. Now, everybody uses all 3 of those senses, but some of them are more potent and strong than the others, and everybody's different. The auditory person is probably going to explain everything. The guy might be an upper belt, and he may be a white belt, but he's still explaining the upper belt because he has to hear it for himself. This guy's getting mad because, why is he telling me I'm a purple belt? But he has to say it because the only way he learns. So the visual person's probably doing this, looking around, blah, blah, blah. The kinesthetic person's probably doing this, shifting their body, feeling everything. But really what I want them to do is use all 3 because they're like banks. If one bank is closed or 2 banks are closed, you better have another bank open to support you. That's either your visual cortex, your auditory, or your kinesthetic. Ultimately, everything is kinesthetic when you download it all. So when we use all 3 senses, I created, like Bruce Lee created fighting without fighting, I scientifically, unscientific, created training without training. Because scientifically, our brain doesn't know the difference between actually doing something and richly going inside and doing it with each sense. So therefore, you're an Olympic athlete, they probably ran you through all these visual things, but it's really better to do it visually, auditory, and kinesthetically, and to feel everything like you have been doing already. So when we start writing something down after we learned it, we're writing it down. And it forces you to use all 3 of these senses. So when I'm writing it down, I have to create the picture, and I have to auditorily explain what that picture is. And to make sure I'm doing it right, I have to step into myself and feel it, kinesthetically feel it. Oh, forgot about that part, and write that down too. So you're using all 3 senses that you used it with, which means the brain doesn't know the difference of training and not training. So if you richly go inside and feel each thing you do as you see it, and you're explaining it to yourself, do this, all 3 senses, and you're training without training, and you're actually getting better. What wires together, fires together, and you're creating those thoughts that came, those same neurochemicals that have a physiological and behavioral response on you. Voila, we're doing magic in action. Now, this is scientific, but I say it's unscientific because it's based upon people's patterns, not statistics. You can't get a theory or a theorem with patterns. It has to be statistics. So it's unscientific.
That's definitely, it reminds me of, a big part of our training when I was skiing competitively is visualization. I mean, I would argue it's probably one of the more important things you'll do as an athlete, because what will happen most of the time when you visualize, if, for example, you visualize your training day, your competition, right? Fighters will do this when they're visualizing stepping in the octagon, right? You picture every single thing. Like I would, from waking up in the morning in my hotel room to what did the cereal feel like if I was eating it? What do the eggs smell like when I'm making it? Where's my equipment? Is it packed?
With you to shake your day.
And I cannot overstate how valuable that is, because when you get, and this is, of course, like not the most applicable to every single person because it's an athletic example of competing at a high level, but when you get in the start gate and you look down the run, you cannot be thinking about your feet or about your boots or about what are you going to do when you land your top jump, what are you going to do through the middle, how fast are you going to go. You have to just hear the words go and do the thing that you've been training, and that's all you can do.
It comes with a good
totally
feeling. It comes with a good feeling
because it has to be done like that. And I think that you brought up such a good point, and this is specific to jiu-jitsu, but becoming autonomous in your actions is a very important step in advancing your skill, because it takes the thought part out of it. Because like you said, if you have to think about it, it's too late, right? So if someone's transitioning to side control and you think, oh wait, I got to get hip out, you're already pinned. But if the second that you feel their knee move to slide over a knee slice, you already begin to move before you're even really recognizing it.
It's a built-in response now.
And you can think about that at night, and you can write about that after training. And so it becomes this much more encompassing process where you're not just, and I don't know, I'm thinking out loud now, like maybe someone listening to this is like, that's a lot to do for a jiu-jitsu class, right? But
It's like
it's
installing
different than
turbo.
just leaving class and going home, you know?
Oh, well, check this out. People, you could consider going there every day for an hour of somebody's day, taking out the enjoyment out of it, out of the equation, and, well, that could be a waste of time. But if you want to make the best out of your time, just add in this 10% more of an element of thinking about it, maybe after class, maybe before you go to bed, whenever, in this specific way with all three of these senses. It's a small investment to be much better than if you didn't do it, because it'd take a bigger investment to do all the makeup for the lack of doing a small thing. I mean, they say it takes 10,000 hours to master something. Dave Ruiz says BS. I think our brains are much more sophisticated and much more capable of a lot more if we learn how to use the matrix of the mind in a much more efficient and effective way. I mean, I've been doing stuff for over a decade that our government can't even pay or can't even pay our psychologists to do for our Olympic athletes. I've questioned a lot of our Olympic athletes and what specifically that the psychologists do, and it's nothing compared to what I do. I use Neuro-Linguistic Programming, design human engineering, hypnotic repatterning. I am reconstructing a person's brain. If they're a fighter, it's like having a perfect psychologist or a hypnotist. You got somebody there that's speaking perfect language patterns, so you get downloaded the perfect information in the most effective and efficient way to hear it for your brain, whether you're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, or whether you feel better off of a pleasure-based or fear-based learning. It's up to that coach who's really going to listen and pay attention to those words. You know, when most people come up and say, "Hey, Dave, I got a question. This doesn't feel right. Can you see what I'm doing wrong?" Most go, "Oh, did you hear what I said? Or did I told you? Blah 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 blah." No, Dave actually listened to what the student was saying. They said, "Hey, Dave, it doesn't feel right." That's a kinesthetic word. Can you see what I'm doing? That's a visual cortex word. So how do I answer and respond to that particular student in a kinesthetic visual way? If I did it in a different pattern, well, that teacher just didn't feel right. But for some reason, that teacher just says it the way I like to hear it, and I just like that teacher. Most of the time, people will go to different schools until the teacher teaches the way that they like to learn, instead of making themselves more inflexible and adapting towards the teachers. It's kind of like what I told the teachers. You should be taking a Ritalin. Forget the kids. You save a lot of money. Just give it to the teachers so they can keep up with all the kids. Save a lot of money. Just one person, right?
It's funny, too, that there are learning opportunities on the mats, too, that you might not be aware of if you're siloed to what you think is your preferred way of learning. Right. For me, I'll give you an example. I never would roll with my eyes closed ever until I saw you and Nick separately do it. And I thought that was so weird. I was like, but you don't see how are you going to, because jiu-jitsu is so tactical on the grips and the position. I felt like that was the biggest improvement overnight. Yeah. And then afterwards that happened to me and now still happens to me because I choose to implement this frequently, is to let go of the winning and losing part. Just fuck it. It doesn't matter. And close your eyes and see what happens. And what you're rewarded with is a boost in physical sensation. Yes. You know where your body is. You get proprioception because you're stealing your visual away from yourself. And so you're forced to heighten these other areas. And what you get from that, you close gaps is what happens. That the tension and the pressure and the tightness improves because you feel how far away you are. You feel that your elbow isn't on your knee. You feel that your hips aren't to their sternum. Like whatever it is, when you open your eyes, it's not your fault, but you're not going to you don't get that. Yeah. And when you close them, it's really hard to explain how much of an impact that made.
Weights on your hands, heavy weights, and you start punching a bag for a while, and then you take the weights off and you're super fast.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you take out all senses and you just leave one sense to do all the work, you start noticing at a hyper rate all the little subtleties you didn't notice before. And then when you take the weights off or put those other senses back on, now you're using all the stuff better with that one now. Now I shut off these and just use that. Now this is heightened. Now I'll do this one now, the third one. And now they're all heightened to their maximum capacity. But that's what I do in my what I call the laboratory. We specifically run one sense and then we add another to it. And we have many different realms and ways of training your brain so your body can get better. And a lot of times I like to train people's bodies because they're always trying to manipulate and control somebody else's body, and they don't even know how to control their own. So you have to do both and then put them together, Just synergistic.
You notice that very quickly with tension, like with new students or people that are just starting, and I mean, admittedly, and myself too, right? I notice I'll catch myself doing this, and it happens less now than when I started, but it'll happen in moments of being matched up to someone who's equally proficient, kind of like I was talking about earlier, where you get tense and you feel your strength kick in. And when you're rolling with people that are just starting, it's always there. It's like the second, because I don't know what, maybe it's a little bit of, it's fear of not knowing what to do. It's not having any of that autonomous patterns like hard baked into you yet because you haven't done it. And so you rely on what you do have, which is tension. And the problem is that when you get tight or stiff, you're sweepable, you're controllable, and you're super predictable.
And there's a lot you're not paying attention to because you can't.
Right. Because it's robbing your focus, right? Because I don't want this person to move.
When we contract, we can't learn new information. We can't love. We can't grow. We can't do anything. But when we relax and expand, you can do anything. You can love. You can learn new information. So there's that pulsation, But once we start getting better and better, more bars start dropping because you're less vulnerable where you thought you once were. So you don't need to put those energy bars up. They can be down because if something goes wrong, still get out of it. I'm all right. It's that attitude.
Man, it's such a valuable art form. When you think about your life and jiu-jitsu and training, being a professor, sharing this with people, what does the future look like for you? Where do you see yourself within the art of jiu-jitsu within the next 10 years? Like, what does this mean to you?
I hope to be around for the next 10. But my whole goal, my whole purpose in life, Rorion, we were cleaning up the Gracie Academy back in the 90s once, and I was back there, and with, I think it was Eric Meyer, my buddy Dr. Eric Meyer, and Rorion comes in from it was in the morning, we were cleaning up in the back room, and he goes, "Hey guys, come here for a second." Shut the door. He showed us a technique, and then he almost with, I don't know what he came from, but he almost like he had tears in his eyes. He goes, if anything ever happened, if I ever die, or if anything ever happens, that we have enough skill here that the seed has been planted, that jiu-jitsu will still grow and perpetuate from this point on, even if I'm not here, because I've planted the seed in the correct way. And to me, that stayed with me. So to me, whether I'm here or not, hopefully I've done my job to pass this knowledge on, to give it to somebody else so they can keep this thing growing and perpetuating. Even when those who haven't been touched by the golden hand of Helio are not here anymore, So I think there's a message still out there waiting for the right person to be put the right way, the way that they need to hear it. And they need to hear the value of what Helio once had to say. And that's going to happen in class. That's going to happen on the mat. It's going to be happening in front of us rare individuals. But I invite anybody and everybody to experience what that is, It's not rubbing your face in the mat. It's showing you something that you might not thought you were capable of before that you now can do, which gives us a new built-in confidence.
I don't even have, yes. I don't have much of a follow-up on that. I mean, it's so, it hits home because it's true, right? Like if that can pass on and it can spread to more people, and it's not like I feel so culty sometimes with jiu-jitsu because I'm such a fan, right? Like I talk about this all the time. It's a big part of my life. But it comes from this place of knowing. Occasionally you'll get a glimpse of, you'll see the perfect application in life of it hitting the right person who really needs it. And you see them come in and you watch them transform. You see the person that they are when they start
I'm
change.
very sensitive to that. I'm very hyper of like what people's needs may be, and if I'm wrong, I like to make sure that I'm flexible enough to gravitate towards what that is, because everybody's personality is different. Yeah, and to see them grow and to change in the direction that they want, or their personality, or their way that their body type is to the best that they can be, and that's unique with each individual. And with everybody, it's comes that you could tell when somebody's having those, miniature epiphanies here and there, because they just got past a plateau or something, or they just got through a new breakthrough, But to me, I think jiu-jitsu is, I think the philosophy should be there, which exudes the strategy. And then, of course, you have to have the perfect technique in the self-defense aspect. But most importantly, which most schools don't teach simply because they don't know unless they saw a video, but it's the punch block that Helio Gracie taught us. We were one of the first Americans in history to be taught it because that's what they kept secret. And the fact that the boys came out with it in combatives was a big upset. But they didn't show everything. That's the good part. But the cat's out of the bag, and I think the world should be equipped with it, and they should come to learn from somebody who's an expert in it to do it, and that's the important piece. I think it's important that people learn the basics the right way, but also too having sky's the limit of whichever direction you want to take that. And that's why I've broken down the art of jiu-jitsu. I've decoded it basically. I've broken it down not by techniques, but by control points of the human anatomy, and basically every which way the human anatomy can bend. So no matter what they do, it's like a constructed system. I no longer think linear and, should I do this technique? He shifted his hip, so now I got to do this technique or that one. No, it's basically I created a complete system where your brain, it's like installing turbo, so whatever technique you do, you don't think linear in technique. You're thinking, this is in my way, like the system of the ladder, of the pass, or the 3 open guard rules, the elbow knee connection, the most important connection in jiu-jitsu itself. If these things aren't highlighted in a very specific way that I have to show, people aren't going to know the true value of it, and they're not going to make it even better than what was before. I always want to highlight these points for people, and I've decoded jiu-jitsu. After you got the basic technique down, I've actually coded a complete system. So no matter who's you like this guy, Helio Gracie, you can like John Danaher, or Eddie Bravo's, this guy, that guy, or a new guy that hasn't even come out yet, and he's got a new system now. My system is universal and goes with all systems. It's a unique way of looking at something. It's like installing turbo. Once it's installed, you're taking off. You may start out the same, but once that turbo kicks in, you're not looking back. It's not the same. You're going to learn at a much faster rate. And what I use is Neuro-Linguistic Programming to better absorb things into people's brain in the right direction of what they want is the important part. But I use design human engineering. If a fighter has a lack in a certain aspect of their brain or anything mental, so we can fix that. We can change it around. We can do anything, So I just love teaching, and I think you talked about a bad experience, people having bad experience walking into a different school. It's my hopes to teach everybody Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, whether you learn by Hiron, Hanner, any one of Helio Gracie's, anybody that's been blessed by Helio. I think he wanted the world to be us to teach the world, because we're teaching it the way he wants it to be shown. That was his idea. So I love new students. I love getting people from scratch. I love people who have been elsewhere. I love getting them before they go elsewhere. I love getting them after the fact so they can see the difference. Just love seeing the difference. I'm not saying, hey, this is better. You're going to pick what's better or what you like best. I just want to make sure that you know that there is one.
I hope that people hear that and give it a shot. I feel like a broken record. There's a couple things that I beat the dead horse on, consistency being one of them. I think that's like the key to anything. So having a routine that you can stick to that allows you consistency, because it just gives you back. You can have low intensity consistency and it'll beat out sporadic high intensity 24/7, no matter what. It just being patient and sticking to things has a big payout. And then the other thing that I think I beat the dead horse is that people should try jiu-jitsu. People should give it a shot. They should go in and just try one day and see how it makes you feel, and be open to the possibility that it might have a big impact on your life. True. and be open to that, because it is cool seeing people feel better about who they are. True. because they're learning this thing is really special.
It is.
And in a way, it's like an antidepressant. Like, you know, you can go in there and
that's a whole nother podcast right there. Yeah, talking about
it
the
just
therapeutic part about it and the things that I've worked with and the people and PTSD and all
it's
that.
amazing when you go in there. Like, I don't know, it's hard. There are not many things that we do in life where you don't have your phone anymore. You know, I think it's about surfing a lot with this. Like, I'm very grateful when I'm in the water because that's all I'm in the water,
Yeah,
right? I'm in the water. That's it. And it's great because no one can get a hold of me. And so it's just you and your thoughts and the waves and nature, and it's great. Yeah. And jiu-jitsu is a beautiful hour and a half where, like, you're just there doing the thing and you're not anywhere else. And there's something very liberating about that. And so on the front side of it, it's this mixed martial arts defense, but I can only say that, like, what you get in return, it's so much more. It's so much more than that.
The outside could look ugly, but the inside is beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
So
might just be one door, but inside there's nothing, people.
Theodore Roosevelt said that jiu-jitsu, don't quote me, he says jiu-jitsu...
You're quoting yourself.
He said jiu-jitsu holds more than all of our athletics put together. You get more value out of jiu-jitsu. I mean, you get value out of it physically. That's the first thing we do it for. But then we get so much more mentally out of it. It calms us down. I'm a much better driver on the highway after jiu-jitsu than I am before.
I don't get, to be honest, like, I don't get riled up anymore. I don't. And if I do, I can see it in real time happening, and I can rope it back in. I couldn't have said that before jiu-jitsu.
You have jiu-jitsu withdrawals, I get angry.
I know, it's crazy, dude. Like, when you travel, well, I mean, now when I travel, I work it in to travel. If I'm gone more than 3 days, I'm finding a place.
That's like so important.
So weird.
I've never, only once in my life I have not brought my gi, and that was my last trip to Colorado. Only once in my life I have not brought my gi. Because it becomes instrumental. It becomes instrumental to. That's what I am. It's like a toothbrush.
Who you are. I mean,
not for me.
I'm not like, I'm not a personally a religious person, but I can see. I mean, I can see how people are religious. I can see why they're religious, and it's.
I've said jiu-jitsu is my religion, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way to any other religions or to our Almighty or anything like that, our universal. But I mean, as far as a way of life and living, even like something like Buddhism or Hinduism, it's just a set of principles to make us act in according to a way that's going to get us along better, not only with others, but with ourselves and everything around us in our environment, so we can have a better life. And I think jiu-jitsu, looking at it not from, you can walk into a meathead gym and not get any of these values out of it, or you can walk into our gym, luckily for you, and discover that there's more than just being able to be stronger and better and healthier and being dominant physically and being able to protect yourself. But there's so much more, like the value of not being depressed and not being unhappy. They say there's books on being in the now and stuff, and jiu-jitsu, there's no other thing that puts you in the now than jiu-jitsu, because if you're not in the now, you're going to get arm locked or choked. You can't think of your other problems. It's just a natural thing not to. When I walk through those 2 doors at the academy, my whole demeanor changes. Everything changes. I'm a different person when I walk through. All of a sudden, I have a smile. All my problems left behind. And you know what? I don't think about them until way after I leave those doors, and I'm like, oh, what was that problem again?
Yeah, you're coming back to the car and there's like an eviction notice and you're like, damn, I forgot there's life outside of this life. Well, Dave, I really want to say thank you for taking the time to be here. I say this on every episode. I mean, it flies by, right? An hour and 35 minutes. I feel like we hopped on here 5 minutes ago. So I really appreciate it. I feel like we really did scratch the surface on a couple things. So we'll absolutely have to do this again in the future. But I appreciate your time, your wisdom, both on the mats, off the mats. And it's a pleasure having you, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Abe. This is great. I'm looking forward to this and more to come in the future. This was awesome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of course.